Protests in Iran have entered their fourth week following the death of Mahsa Amini after she was arrested by the country's morality police. Rights groups say that more than 185 people have been killed. Hundreds more have been injured and thousands have been arrested by security forces. Yesterday, female students in the Iranian capital Tehran chanted "Get Lost" as the country's president, Ebrahim Raisi, visited their university campus. So to get more on this, I'm joined now by Iranian women's rights activist Mooniter. We're hoping to be joined by Elnaz Sarbar as well. Mooniter, you explained to my colleague earlier that Mooniter is your activist name. Could you tell us maybe why you're using a false name here?
Absolutely. Hello to all of you, first of all. I chose to go by Mooniter because my immediate family resides in Iran, and this government has a track record of harassing our families in Iran. So by this, I'm just trying to make their job a little bit harder to track down my family and harass them, pretty much.
So we're talking about a tyrannical regime here, aren't we? And finally, we're seeing people taking this stand. But can you give us some sense of the kind of oppression that women are under in Iran?
So it's very fascinating because I was listening to your show. It's fascinating what people are fighting for in Europe and what we were fighting for in the Middle East. So this government, sorry, I know your show is a comedy, but I have to get serious a little bit about
this.
No,
it's not all comedy, don't worry. We can talk seriously.
So what happens in Iran is that women, after the 1979 revolution, prior to that, women were allowed to go outside hijabless. We had female politicians, we had female judges. But after the 1979 Islamic revolution, immediately a year after, they passed a law mandating women to wear hijab to go outside of their houses. And from the age of 7, I and all of the women in Iran were forced to wear scarves, hijab, in order to be able to go to school and get educated. And our schools were also gender segregated. So schools for boys and schools for girls. So I'm talking about the entire nation. It's not just one school or two schools. Everybody had to wear hijab in order to be able to get educated. And then years went on, they started enforcing this hijab morality police. So if we would go to parks, if we would go to trips or anywhere, just like Mahsa Amini, who was in Tehran for a visit to her family, and she got arrested and she was brutally beaten by the hijab police, and later she died in custody. So these are the real problems that we have and issues that we have in Iran. And this government, from the beginning of taking the power, they made a strong statement that they are the dictatorship. So for the world not to realize this and yet work with this regime, for us Iranians, it's not understandable, because they have all the characteristics of a dictatorship. Women don't have freedom in Iran. Students get murdered. Right now we have students as young as 16 who were murdered in Iran, protesting for their rights of speech and the right to freedom to choose what they want to wear. We can't even wear what we want. We can't wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and fix ourselves to go outside the way we want. We have to obey the Islamic dress code in order to be seen in the society.
Yes, we have actually got our other guest, Elnaz Sarbar, who's going to join us as well at this point, I believe. Elnaz, we've just been hearing from Mooniter about the situation in Iran and what women have to face. But do you feel that, could you give us a little bit about your background and your involvement with this cause?
Sure. I was born in Iran. I grew up there. I lived there until I was 28 years old. So I experienced firsthand what it means to live under the Islamic Republic. And I moved to the U.S. Afterwards when I was 28 years old. And here, at some point, I realized, even though I'm living in the U.S., I am still afraid of the Islamic Republic. And I want to share the story. In 2018, there was this Iranian girl on Instagram. She danced beautifully, and all she did was putting a video of herself dancing on Instagram. And the Islamic Republic arrested her and closed her account. And she was forced to a confession. And at that point, I love dancing, and I want to share this. I mean, there's a lot of background here. A lot of people might not know. Dancing in public is illegal for women in Iran, and singing as well, beside everything else that your other guest was telling us. So they asked this girl, and I'm thinking to myself, I love to record a video of myself dancing and publish in her support. That's my first thought. And then my second thought is like, oh, if I go back to Iran, I'm going to be in trouble because I'm supporting this person, even though I'm doing this outside Iran where the laws don't apply. And I realized 7,000 kilometers away, I'm still afraid of Islamic Republic. And then it hit me that, oh my God, I have to start being afraid of this, and I have to talk loud, and that might mean I'm not be able to go back to Iran, because if I go back to Iran, I, might feel consequences. But at this time, I decided that I need to be echo of the voices of Iranian women. So I joined.
So you've both had experiences where you both grew up in Iran under this regime, being forced to wear the Islamic dress in accordance with the morality police. But I've heard women in the West, feminists in the West, sometimes say that it's empowering to wear the veil, and this is something that is almost like a feminist symbol. How do you respond to that?
Well,
go ahead, Elnaz.
I would say, to me, that's a symbol of oppression, honestly, because you have to wear it. It doesn't matter if you want to wear it or not. I was 7 and I had to wear it to school, and I did not want to wear it. As a 7-year-old, I didn't want to wear it, and I had no choice in that. And that means my opinion as a woman, I got the message that my opinion didn't matter. I have no voice. I couldn't. So psychologically, it taught me how not to say no to anything. And that goes from like saying no to hijab, saying no to other oppressions that were going in Iran, saying out to asking for kind of accountability. Even I would say it affected my marital life, because, I felt I didn't matter.
So, Mooniter, do you think it's just that people in the West aren't familiar with what's going on?
That's absolutely what it is. Because if feminists are always saying that, they're advocating that my body, my choice, how about Iranian women? How is this our body but Islamic Republic's choice? So or even the LGBTQ rights. Currently in Iran, September of 2022, we had 2 female LGBTQ activists who are on death row right now. They've been sentenced to death because they were activists for LGBTQ community. On what crime? Corruption on earth. That's the title of the crime that they've been sentenced to death for. So where are the community? Where's the LGBT community right now to stand up for the LGBT community in Iran right now who are on death row? Where are all the feminists in the world standing up for us to say Iranian woman's body, Iranian's woman choice? Where are they right now? Are they raising a voice for us?
Do you think, Mooniter, it's because there's a kind of cultural relativism where people in the West feel that if they are to pass judgment on Iranian culture, that this is Islamophobic or this is bigoted or prejudiced in some way?
This is what they created in the West. Islamophobia is what's been created by the West, and it's been fed to the media. Standing up for freedom should never be labeled as Islamophobia, and I'm going to explain why. Because when the feminists that are talking about Islamophobia, and they've always shut us down when we try to raise our voice, are not listening to the Iranians. Prior to 1979, hijab was not mandatory in Iran. So how is this our culture when up until 1979, this was not mandatory, and all of a sudden from 1979, in the past 4 decades, it became our culture? No, it's not our culture. This is not our culture, and the world needs to know that. Standing up for freedom is not against Islamophobia, because like if a woman wants to wear their hijab, go ahead, wear it. We support you, but we don't want to wear it. So you need to support us too if you're standing up for freedom.
So, Elnaz, would you agree?
Then that's bigotry.
Elnaz, would you agree with this, that we need more support? Iran and the Iranian protests and the Iranian women need more support globally?
100%. Yeah. I mean, we saw how people raised up and came to rally when George Floyd was killed. We have a worse situation than that in Iran, and we really need solidarity from all people. And even more than that, because now the regime of the Islamic Republic is something that Iranians don't want. And we want the world to realize that and don't deal with them. I mean, in terms of ideology, they don't have there's no difference between them and ISIS, except that, they dress better, they speak English fluently, and they smile when they shake your hand. But at the same time, the way they treat women is as bad. It's as a woman, you have no right to the custody of children. You can't go as a mother to a bank and open a bank account for your children. And this is what Iranian people realize. This is Iranian women want to change, and they are speaking loud and clear. There is protests in more than 100 cities, and people are like, that's the dictator, and they really don't want this regime, and we want the rest of the world to recognize that we don't want this.
It's interesting to see in some of the videos where I've seen images of protesters burning their veils and dancing in the street, which, as you pointed out, is not legal. A lot of them are very young. A lot of them will have grown up under this regime. They're not the ones who lived before the revolution and saw what it was like to have that freedom. So this is clearly something that women are united by within Iran. Is that right? Is that a fair thing to say, Mooniter?
Yeah, it's absolutely a fair thing to say. This movement started with a beautiful chant which says, "Women, life, liberty." So this is a movement that Iranian women have started. So it cannot get any more feminist than this for the feminists to back us up. And then it got backed up by Iranian men, Iranian students, everybody throughout the country. They stood up behind the women and they said, you know what, enough of this. We don't want this oppression on our women. We don't want this. So, and the world needs to realize that it's not just forced hijab. Iranian women aren't allowed to sing, ride bikes, simple things like that, ride bikes. We're not allowed to swim in open water. We're not allowed to enter sports stadiums. We're not allowed to get freely divorced from our husbands. We're not allowed to leave the country unless authorized by a guardian or our husband. We're not allowed to go to school unless authorized by a guardian or a husband. And if they decide that we shouldn't, we cannot go to school. So this is a systematic discrimination on a particular gender. I'm not saying that Iranian men are free to do anything they want, no, but it's systematic when it comes to the women in Iran. So that's why it's very important for all the feminists and activists around the world to back us up, because it's all about freedom. The message is freedom. And once Iran, within the Middle East, if you ever followed Middle East news prior to 1979, Middle East was very peaceful. People would travel there. There was no bombs and attacks and this and that. But right after 1979, the minute the Islamic regime took over, everything started to go wrong. And this regime is just anti-Semitic. They are homophobes. They are misogynistic. They're everything that the world today is saying that, no, we don't want to welcome that anywhere in the world. But yet again, they sit down with the heads of the states and they try to negotiate with them.
Elnaz, can I bring you in here just to ask about these current protests? Do you feel more, because there have been attempts at these kind of protests before that have been sort of quashed by the regime. But this feels different. This feels like it's gaining momentum with more and more support from various factions. Do you have an optimistic sense that this could actually lead to maybe even regime change?
I do, because this is day 25. This is day 25 that's ongoing, and it's ongoing despite the brutal suppression that you can see on the street. The regime is hitting back people. They are using pellet guns. They are shooting at people's faces. And, today there was a video of a the female high schooler who came out and sent in a picture of her, said, I'm hit by a pellet gun, but I'm going to go to the street. I'm not going to give up until we have this regime gone. So We have seen this before. In 2019, government did the same thing. They shut down the internet, they brought the security force, they shot people, and then they squashed the oppression. But this time we see that people keep going into the street every day, despite the brutal oppression. And there is a confidence, there's a self-confidence among the women that we haven't seen before. And I think for me, what I see is this a tipping point. We have crossed a boundary that Iranian women will not go back. They will not adhere to Islamic laws that Islamic Republic is pushing on women anymore. And, I'm very, very optimistic.
Well, we're almost out of time, but quick final word to Mooniter. Your thoughts on that subject?
What's happening right now in Iran is Iranians are not after reform. It's very clear what they want. In their chants, they say death to the dictator. They want this regime out the door in the back shit. And they're very clear with delivering their message. And the world just needs to start listening and call this a revolution for what it is.
Well, the courage of these protesters I find quite remarkable, and I really appreciate you both coming on. I hope you can come back on the show again to talk about things as things develop.
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
We would love to. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed.